CEO Jacob Reed had always been proud of what he had built. His fast food chain began with a single unit and grew to 13 locations spread across several cities. For years, he cultivated a work culture based on respect and commitment to good service. At least that was what he believed. In recent months, however, things began to seem different. Internal reports indicated that customers were complaining more. Negative comments about the service and quality were multiplying on social media. To make matters worse, employee turnover was higher than ever. Regional managers assured Jacob that everything was under control. But something didn't add up. As the CEO, he trusted the numbers, but he also trusted his intuition, and it was telling him that something was wrong. That's when Jacob made a radical decision. To uncover the truth about the state of his business, he decided to go undercover at one of his fast food restaurants. He chose a unit in a suburban neighborhood, far enough away so that no one would recognize him. Most of the employees had never seen him in person. To ensure that he would go unnoticed, Jacob changed his appearance. He let his beard grow unkempt, swapped his impeccable suits for a simple hoodie and worn jeans. To complete the disguise, he put on thick-rimmed glasses. Now he looked just like any other customer. When he entered the restaurant, the atmosphere seemed busy but different from what he had imagined. The booths were a bit worn, and the decor looked aged. It wasn't terrible, but it also didn't convey the warm and welcoming atmosphere he wanted for his chain. He sat at a table by the window and waited. Shortly after, a young waitress approached. "Hello, welcome," she said with a tired smile. Her badge indicated her name, Megan. Jacob noticed the weariness in her voice. Her eyes had slight dark circles, and her smile seemed forced, as if she were merely on autopilot. "Just a coffee, please," Jacob replied. Megan nodded and quickly moved away, deftly weaving between tables. While waiting, Jacob observed her in silence. She was efficient, no doubt. She handled multiple orders at once, refilled drinks, and fetched dishes from the kitchen, but it was clear that she was overwhelmed. As soon as Megan returned with the coffee, Jacob placed his order, a hamburger with French fries. As she was taking the order, a loud voice echoed from the kitchen. "Megan, what's going on in there? You're late again." The voice belonged to a short, stocky man, probably in his 40s, wearing a stained apron. Jacob deduced that he must be the shift manager. Megan shrugged, looking tense. "I'm doing the fastest I can," she replied, trying to keep calm. Jacob frowned. He had always advocated for a respectful work environment, and this form of public reprimand was not part of what he wanted for his company. He remained silent, watching. While waiting for his order, he overheard snippets of conversation from other customers. "This delay is outrageous," complained a man seated in the booth next door. "The manager was super rude to our waitress," murmured a teenager to her friend. The tension in the restaurant was evident. It was not the welcoming experience Jacob had in mind when he founded the chain. Shortly after, Megan returned with his dish. "I'm sorry for the delay," she said, avoiding eye contact. Jacob gave a small smile. "Don't worry, you're doing a great job." Her eyes lit up for a moment, as if she wasn't used to hearing praise. Jacob had barely taken a bite of his hamburger when he heard muffled sobs coming from the kitchen. He stopped immediately. The sound grew louder. Without a doubt, it was Megan. "I'm trying my best, okay?" Her voice sounded cracked. "I haven't had a break in 6 hours, and I'm doing everything I can," the manager retorted disdainfully. "If you can't handle the pressure, maybe this isn't the right job for you." Jacob felt his stomach turn. He had built this company to be a place where people enjoyed working, and now he saw an employee being humiliated in front of her colleagues. Without hesitating, he got up and walked to the kitchen door. What he saw made his chest tighten. Megan had trembling hands, wiping her eyes. The manager, Rick, was watching her with his arms crossed and a frustrated expression. Two cooks kept their heads down, clearly uncomfortable but without intervening. Jacob took a deep breath, keeping his composure. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice firm yet controlled. Rick spun around abruptly. "Who are you?" "Just a customer who saw something he didn't like." Rick let out a short, sarcastic laugh. "It's none of your business." Jacob ignored the provocation and looked at Megan. "It seems like you need a break. Why don't you sit down for a few minutes? Rick laughed again. We don't have time for breaks. We're short-staffed. Jacob's patience was running thin. There's always time to treat people with respect, he said, his voice taking on an authoritative tone. Silence fell over the kitchen. Rick clenched his teeth, but before he could respond, one of the cooks spoke up. Megan hasn't stopped since the shift started, he said. She didn't even have time to drink water. Rick shot the young man, Connor, an angry look. Stay out of this, Connor. Jacob looked directly at Rick. Who is responsible for ensuring that the team can do their job? Because, from where I stand, the pressure seems to be coming from the way this place is managed. Rick opened his mouth to retort, but Jacob didn't give him space. You might want to rethink the way you treat people, because if I were your boss, I wouldn't tolerate this. Rick sneered. Well, you're not my boss, so... Before he could finish, Jacob took his wallet out of his pocket and opened it, revealing his CEO badge. Actually, I am. The silence in the kitchen was immediate. Megan's eyes widened, Connor stopped chopping vegetables, and even Rick's face lost its color. Jacob maintained his gaze fixed on the manager. Now why don't we have a conversation in the office? Rick hesitated, then nodded stiffly and headed to the back office. Jacob looked at Megan before following him. I'm not going to let this slide. She nodded slightly, speechless. Jacob knew that this would be a difficult conversation, but he was determined. His restaurant needed to change, and that change started now. Jacob closed the office door behind him and faced Rick, who now looked far less confident than before. The manager crossed his arms, trying to maintain a defensive posture, but Jacob could already see through the facade. So, Rick, began Jacob, keeping a firm tone, you've been working here for 2 years, right? Rick nodded. And in all that time you thought it was acceptable to treat your team that way? Rick opened his mouth to answer, but Jacob raised his hand to silence him. No need to make excuses, I've seen enough. I saw you humiliating a dedicated employee. I saw you ignoring the team's well-being. I saw customers complaining about the service. All while you act as if none of that is your responsibility. Rick took a deep breath. Look, I was just trying to keep things running. We're always short-staffed, and if I don't push the team, nothing happens. Jacob frowned. And you think that yelling and humiliating your employees makes them work better? This isn't an office, Mr. Reed, Rick replied in an irritated tone. This is a restaurant. Things are intense. Intensity doesn't justify abuse, Jacob retorted without hesitation. If the team is overwhelmed, you should be resolving it responsibly, not making the situation worse. Rick snorted. So what's your miracle plan then? Magically find more employees? Jacob shook his head. My plan is to hire more people, yes, but my first step is to ensure that the leadership is competent. And frankly, Rick, you have shown that you have no capacity to lead. Rick's eyes widened. What? You are fired, effective immediately. Rick turned pale. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, replied Jacob. The culture of this company does not tolerate employee abuse. You have failed to maintain a healthy and productive environment. Rick was speechless. He opened his mouth several times as if to protest, but he couldn't form an argument. HR will contact you regarding your termination. Now, I want you to pack your things and leave. Rick hesitated for a moment, but saw that there was no room for negotiation. With no other choice, he gathered his belongings and left without saying another word. Jacob exhaled deeply, running his hand through his hair. He didn't like firing people, but some decisions were necessary for the good of the company. When he stepped out of the office, he found Megan and Connor in the dining area, both clearly anxious to know what would happen. Rick is no longer working here, announced Jacob. Megan's eyes widened. He was fired. Jacob nodded. Yes, and this is just the beginning. He paused, observing the reaction of the employees around him. Everyone seemed surprised, but a silent relief filled the atmosphere. I know things have been difficult around here. I failed by leaving management unsupervised. But that changes today. Jacob looked directly at Megan and Connor. I want to speak with both of you after the shift. We need to discuss some changes. Megan and Connor exchanged an uncertain look, but nodded. At the end of the day, Jacob sat down with Megan and Connor in one of the booths. "All right, let's get straight to the point," began Jacob. "First, thank you for everything you've done to keep this restaurant running, despite the poor management." Megan gave a shy smile. "We just do what we can." "And that is a lot," said Jacob. "So, Connor, I'm promoting you to assistant manager. You have shown loyalty and initiative, qualities that a leader must have." Connor blinked in surprise. "Me?" "Yes, you," confirmed Jacob. "I want someone who really cares about the team." Connor smiled, still shocked. "I don't even know what to say." "Thank you." Jacob nodded and turned to Megan. "And you, Megan, will receive a salary increase. In addition, I'm going to implement a bonus system to recognize the team's effort." Megan's eyes filled with tears. "Really? Really?" Jacob assured her. She took a deep breath and smiled. "That means a lot, thank you." Jacob smiled back. "This is just the beginning. I'm going to bring in more employees to ease the workload and ensure that everyone gets fair breaks. We're also hiring a new manager, someone experienced and who respects the team." Megan and Connor now looked more excited. "This is amazing," said Megan. "Just promise me one thing," Jacob requested. "If you see something wrong happening again, talk to me. I want to ensure that this restaurant continues to be a great place for both employees and customers." Connor nodded. "You can count on it, Mr. Reed." Jacob smiled in satisfaction. "Now let's make this place work as it should." In the following days, Jacob personally oversaw the restaurant's operations. He hired 3 more employees, ensuring that the team had sufficient support. He also interviewed candidates for the manager position until he found Denise, an experienced and respectful professional. The change in the restaurant was almost immediate. With a more motivated and well-managed team, the service improved significantly. Customers began to notice the difference and praise the quality of the service. On a quiet afternoon, as Jacob was preparing to leave, Megan approached him. "Hey, Mr. Reed." "Yes?" She smiled. "I just wanted to say that this place really does look different now. Better." Jacob returned the smile. "That's good to hear." As he walked to his car, Jacob felt genuine pride. He had learned a valuable lesson. A business is not made up solely of numbers, but of people, and he would never forget that. Jacob got into his car and took one last look at the restaurant. For the first time in a long while, he felt that his company was back on the right track. He realized that it wasn't enough to just expand and pursue profit. It was essential to ensure that the company's culture remained intact. While driving to the office, an idea occurred to him. He would visit more units undercover. It was time to ensure that all of his fast food restaurants reflected the values he had always championed, because in the end, a company is only as strong as the people who build it. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like and hit the bell so you don't miss any videos.